Good morning, Kalimerises. Both today's gospel and epistle reading have much to offer us in the way of understanding life after death, which is a question that, if not most of us, I think all of us at some point in time may have asked. When we were young, we may have asked something about death, having witnessed perhaps the first death of an insect or a bird or perhaps a pet. And perhaps even remember the passing of a loved one, as I remember my first funeral of my papu, my grandfather. So many questions about life and death, in fact, plague us, if not bring about curiosity. Because it is about unknown things. Life itself, where it comes from, how does it manage to all of a sudden happen? Do we give thought to this? We have great debate in this country for many decades about life and death. We seem to relegate life more to people who are alive standing in front of us than thinking about cells, thinking about what happens within a womb. We seem to rather give much thought to liberty and freedom to make choices, but forget to remember that St. Paul tells us that we are free to make any decision we want, but not every decision we make is a good one. Today's gospel passage presents us with another one of those questions. Degree. It's a degree of whether we participate or not. St. John Chrysostom shares with us some wonderful thoughts about Lazarus and the rich man. He says to us that this rich man is living quite beautifully, as many of us would describe it, a life of luxury, a life of freedom. He has the money to do anything he wants and decides to do many things, unfortunately, to his own benefit and not to the benefit of anyone else. In fact, St. John Chrysostom calls this rich man a wicked man. One would think perhaps that is a bit much to describe this man. We don't know anything about him other than he is rich and he lives sumptuously and eats sumptuously. But there's something about this man that we learn later on in the gospel that tells us perhaps St. John Chrysostom's description of him as being wicked is in fact true. There's a poor man that lays outside his gate. It's not outside the back gate. It's not down an alley. It's not in a corner. It's outside his front gate. And so he has to pass by this man every day. And in fact, he does. This is how he goes in and out of his house. But he gives this man no attention at all. What we learn, sadly, is that the rich man, after death, knows very well who this poor, sick man outside his gate is. He even calls him by name when he speaks to Abraham. Allow Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and touch my tongue, for I am in great anguish in this place. St. John Chrysostom shares with us this description. The rich man in his life enjoyed many blessings. Lazarus, very few, if any, blessings at all. The rich man lived a beautiful and wonderful life in luxury. The poor man, Lazarus, lived in poverty. The rich man dies and is buried. Lazarus, however, dies, and his soul is carried by angels to heaven into the embrace of Abraham. The rich man has fine linen to clothe himself, Lazarus, very little. The rich man has every advantage to take care of him, his health, his household. Lazarus has dogs to lick his wounds. The rich man is simply buried in a cemetery, but Lazarus has angels to carry his soul into heaven. One might call this divine justice. But it brings to us the opportunity to think about grace. The grace that St. Paul speaks about in his epistle. And even though St. Paul is witness to many things, and some believe that the man that he is talking about, this man who 14 years before had gone and reached into a third heaven and experienced things that he could not describe, some believe that this man was St. Paul himself. But St. Paul tells us that despite all of the blessings, all of the opportunity, all of the things that he comes to know about Jesus Christ and wishes to share with people, he has a thorn in his side that he has prayed to God 3 times to remove. But God does not remove it. He allows it to still hurt and affect St. Paul in a very difficult way. And what is God's response to St. Paul after the 3rd time? My grace is sufficient for you. The same grace that was sufficient for Lazarus, the poor man. Because which one of us would say that what the rich man enjoyed was better than what Lazarus received after his death? I, for one, would not. If I lived in such poverty as Lazarus, I would not have cursed the Lord. I would not have said anything. I would have thanked the Lord for his grace and his blessings. I would still be concerned about why is this happening to me, but at the same time, I would say to myself, as I believe and a believer, that God is great and he has a plan for me. Grace should be sufficient for all of us. God's love, his elegance, his poise. The grace that we speak about several times in the liturgy. The grace that is witnessed in the Gospels. The grace that the saints and the martyrs enjoyed in their life, even though they suffered, and many of them unto death, unto martyrdom, which one of them would not have said and received God's love through his grace and found it to be sufficient for them? How many of their stories reflect the same? One could preach about all of the issues of social justice today. But despite all of our efforts and the billions of dollars that we throw and put and allow to be used to supposedly help the poor, we still have great poverty. We still have great suffering. We still have great illnesses. We still have all of the things that we think that we can somehow take care of and dismiss and remove and fix. And yet, we still have all of those things that still exist despite all of our efforts. But has our society thought about God's grace in this effort? Has society thought about what God's plan is for humanity in our life? Has society thought about the power of God in individual lives that can affect change in many people's lives? How many people are like the rich man that live a very comfortable and beautiful life, and really, even though they know the poor people around them, do very little to help them. It is not a great sin to have great wealth. It's not even a great sin to have a little wealth. It's not a sin at all. What the sin is that we only think that all of this wealth and luxury belongs to me, and I don't have to share it with anyone. And the Lord said, as through St. Paul, yes, you're free to make any decision you want, but not any decision that you make will be good for you. Let us think about other people, not ourselves. We could think about how the Lord has blessed us and how thankful we are and how grateful that through his blessings we're able to support our families and to care for people around us. But let us also think about other people beyond just the immediate family. Let us think about others who do not have those great blessings that we enjoy. And it doesn't mean that we have to become poor to help them become rich. It simply means that we need to think about something and others than ourselves. God gives us his grace and the gifts and the blessings to be used for the benefit of all. Because he does not squander those gifts and blessings upon only those of us who are grateful. He shares them with everyone, whether they believe in him or not, whether they offer praise to him or not, whether they build great buildings to his glory or build nothing at all or wish to remove them and raise them to the ground. God's grace continues to bless our world. And all we have to do is acknowledge it and realize that it is truly sufficient for our life. Amen.